What's going on? Welcome to the Dad Edge Podcast. I'm Larry Hagner, your host and founder of this show, and this is all about money. I love when my dog's in the background just scratching back there. You can barely see him, but there he is. Yep, going crazy. Yep. All right. Thanks, dog. Thanks for ruining my intro. But you know what? It's not about perfection here. That's what it's all about, because fatherhood is not perfection. Hey, so today we have a very exciting interview that's right in the wheelhouse of mastering our personal finances, our family finances. I talk about the 5 dimensions all the time of being a father, husband, man. One is mastering finances. The other is optimizing physical, mental, emotional health, creating a legendary marriage, epic connection and influence with your kids, as well as being a leader in your business and or community. So today, man, it's all about money. And today I am speaking to the founder of YNAB. And some of you might not know what YNAB is. In fact, you're probably listening to it like, the heck is YNAB? YNAB. You need a budget. Budget. Ooh, ouch, right? Sometimes that word, it's like diet. Like, it's like, I hate talking about the budgets. But what if we reframe that? What if we reframed it to give every dollar a job, and you manage your money and your money not manage you, right? So that's what we're talking about today, is how we can basically be the general, and our money is like $1 bills that are soldiers, and we tell it what to do. And Jesse Mecham in 2003, he started this journey of basically financial independence and budgeting and whatnot. He was married to his wife, Julie, when they were still students. Fast forward to 2020, 17 years later, they have 7 kids. And Jesse has been able to build YNAB into a multi-million-dollar resource that literally changes the game and changes financial frames and pictures and situations for families literally worldwide. My wife and I have been a member of YNAB for a long time. We've been using their software for a long time. You've heard me talk about it on the show several times, but in this particular show, Jesse and I go off topic a little bit, pleasantly surprised off topic, where we talk about how we can create more intimacy in our marriage and how we can create better connection. And sometimes even like our insecure thoughts that we have all by ourselves that can kind of run amok, and how we can be really authentic with our wife and even share with her what those are and be truly authentic, no secrets. Like, Jesse just literally changes the game. We went in a direction I didn't expect, and I was so pleasantly surprised that we did, because the first 30 minutes of this show is all about marriage. It's really nothing about money. And there's so many gems in the first 30 minutes of this show. You guys will thoroughly enjoy it. Then the back half of the show, we really get into money management and budgeting, but it's more about creating a vision of what you want your life to look like, and not necessarily being a slave to budgeting. And that's why I love the YNAB software, because you literally, you tell your money what to do. It doesn't tell you what to do, and it runs differently than a budget. So there are 4 rules to YNAB, and he's going to talk about them today. And number 1 is give every dollar a job. I've already mentioned that. You are the general, you are the boss, you go tell your money what to do. And that's how this software works. Embracing your true expenses. So a lot of us, we have what's called committed expenses and uncommitted expenses, and understanding what those are, like your mortgage, your electric, your water bill, your utilities. Like, those are committed costs. Like, you have to work those in. And then being able to sprinkle in the other things that aren't necessarily the norm, like your medical bills, or maybe it's the vet bill, or maybe it's your car maintenance. If you have a car, spoiler alert, you're going to need new tires at some point in time. Guaranteed it will happen. Might as well plan for it. The other thing too is rolling with the punches. So there are going to be times where you are going to fail, and things are going to come up that you didn't plan for. Well, YNAB will help you do that. And Jesse goes into that as well. And the rule number 4 is aging your money. And I know you're like, aging your money? What does that even mean? Aging your money, think of it like an envelope system, okay? We all know Christmas is once a year, right? Last time I checked, it's December 25th. We all know it's there. Yet in November, somehow we're like, oh, I didn't plan for it. But being able to age your money, in other words, plan proactively, okay, Christmas is coming, this vacation is coming, tire maintenance on my car is coming, oil changes are coming, kids' tuition is coming. All these things that we need to proactively think about. YNAB helps you do that. So it's not necessarily like, oh, this was our income and these are our expenses. Now it allows you to proactively plan for these things. So today's show, all about money, all about marriage, and all about parenting. And you guys will love this particular interview with Jesse Mecham. Not to mention, if you're checking us out on YouTube, the guy's got the COVID mullet going on, which is cool. He looks like a professional pitcher. So, all right, gentlemen, no more talk from me. Here's my interview with the one and the only Mr. Jesse Mecham, founder of YNAB. Jesse Mecham, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's really cool. Actually, I turned on the Anaheim Angels game and I saw you pitching on the mound.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm the closer. I wish you had seen a live game. That would mean that they were happening,
Right. But we are in August but we're recording this in May. So I fingers crossed, baseball season.
Yeah, that's true. We could be hopeful. So
Right. Yeah. So for you in the audience, we're recording this in May, 3 months before the show actually airs. And Jesse and I were just chewing the fat on our COVID hair. So Jesse, just kind of go to the side a little bit, man. Show them the business in the front, party in the back.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm in a convertible, there's a lot of horizontal going on. So, yeah.
Oh man, I love it. So, okay. So it's been a couple years, I think, since you first came on the show. At the time, I believe you guys were pregnant, just about ready to have baby number 6. And now we are at
number 7. Yeah. Number 7, little boy. So we won. The tiebreaker happened. We were 3-3.
Yeah.
The tiebreaker rolled in. Brooks. He was born on the biggest. Utah had an earthquake on March 18th.
Yeah.
Early in the morning.
Right.
Which is rare for us, thankfully. But it was like the biggest earthquake in 30 years here.
Yeah.
And then he was born. So part of me was like, okay, when Brooks came, the earth trembled. That's pretty cool, And then I also thought we could name him Quake or something cool like that, but that didn't fly. So Brooks.
Brooks.
Yeah.
What are the names of all your kids? You probably remember them, right?
I'll start from the top because it's easier that way. But we've got Porter and then Harrison. So it's 2 boys. Everyone's 2 years apart. Lydia she comes in 3rd, and then Max, and then Rose. And then we took a 4-year break, which if you're thinking about having another one, but you have like a 1-year-old right now, that 4-year break, it's awesome. So then Faye came 4 years after Rose, and then Brooks came 4 years after Faye. So we did the 4-year thing twice.
So your oldest, I'm terrible at math. So your oldest now is what?
He's 16.
16, dude. You don't look old enough to have a 16-year-old.
Thank you.
How old are you?
I'm a 39.
39 with 16-year-old. Well, I have
an intense skincare regimen. So
not only is he the founder of YNAB, but he also uses. I don't even know.
You need a regimen. It's another company. It's a side thing.
Right. It's kind of funny you say that. I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and one of my reps, I had I think 7 females on my team and 3 men. And I'll never forget working with this one lady one day, and she had beautiful skin, all this. And I was like, I told her, I was like, wow, your complexion's, it's like flawless. And it's like, what do you do? I'm just curious. And she told me, she's like, well, you have your lotion routine. And I'm like, my what? She's like, your lotion routine, how you wash your face and then you put on, and I'm like, you want to know how I wash my face? It's whatever shampoo is left over from my hair. Yeah, and I just sort of, that's really it. That's my routine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
wash my face.
What is that? It's so weird. I've never heard of that. So how long have you known your wife for?
We met back in 2002, and then we courted for a year, got married pretty quickly, and then a year after had our first. So we kind of met, dated fast. I mean, fast for normal standards, and then had our first pretty fast too. So it's been. I didn't do like the whole let's be married and just get to know each other for a while thing before the little people come. Like it was kind of like, let's get to know each other when things are really, really hard. And that's what we decided to do. But it worked really, really well. So
that's cool, man. Yeah. What's one thing you have most appreciated about just lessons learned about being married? Obviously, it's a dad show, so we can start there.
Yeah. Man, everything you think of sounds pretty cliche. Here's one thing that we've just gotten better at over the years. We'll be, let's see, it's 19. So we married in 2003. So we've been married 16 years. 20. We've been married 17 years. We're not in 19, we're in 20. Anyway, one thing that I realized is if we did this thing that was really radical a year ago, where we started telling each other random thoughts we would have. Like, you know how you'll have a random thought. You're like, that's the weirdest thought. I can't believe I even had that thought. We just started trying to do like this radical openness. I mean, I distinctly remember, this is pretty personal, but I think it's probably appropriate. I distinctly remember one time we were kind of on the outs with each other for a little, like a couple hours or whatever. I wasn't feeling it. And I remember walking out of our bedroom and grabbed the doorknob, and I had a thought that was like, she doesn't love you. She just is here because it's a good material. Like, the thought was more concise, but like, she's just here for the support, but she doesn't actually love you. And I have that thought comes in my mind like a sentence. And I turn around to her. I'm like, hey, we're doing the thought thing. You want to hear the thought that just came into my head? And she's like, yeah. So I tell her, and it was like the thought lost all credibility. It lost all power. And she was like, man, that is a dark thought. And I said, yeah, it was dark. And then that was it. So it's something that we're just starting really to think about. And we'll go for weeks where I'm like, oh, we haven't really shared anything like that. But when we do, it's amazing how any negative thought that I have, where I just tell her, like, I had this thought that I can't manage the business, I can't do this, or I'm inept here. She'll just kind of be like, man, that's negative, also not true,
Yeah.
And it just takes the teeth out of it. It was like a week, an intense week for us of practicing that and doing that. And I mean, I didn't read a book and find it or anything. We just kind of started saying like, well, I've had this thought before. And she'd be like, really? And then she'd be like, well, I one time had this thought. And you're like, man, it's just like negative stuff that just comes in. And I don't know. It just brought us closer as we shared that. So I'm like a rookie. I'm giving advice where I'm a total rookie. But it's been a cool experiment. So I would encourage everyone to just go to their wife and say, hey, I'm going to do this thing where like we share everything, every random thought, stupid, embarrassing, whatever, and give it a shot. You'll find that there's some magic that happens. It's awesome.
I mean, I'm really, really glad we're going in this direction. I didn't expect this because obviously it's going to be more financially focused, but I like this, right? That's true authenticity, my man. Yeah, it's true vulnerability right there. That is like, let me peel the onion back a little bit and let you know what's going on here. And the cool thing that I want to really acknowledge and appreciate you for is sometimes the thoughts that we have, to say them out loud, especially someone who's so close to us, man, that is some scary thing. That's some scary stuff right there. The cool thing though, the really cool takeaway is that I can't remember the word you actually used, but you basically deactivated the thought. I can't remember what word you used, but the thought no longer had power.
Yeah.
Because you were able to say it out loud. You were able to say it to someone that you trust. And she was able to be like, wow, like, that's a dark thought and not necessarily true, which didn't give because I mean, our thoughts a lot of times can just run amok in our head. And if they go unchecked, I mean, they can send us down just a rabbit hole.
Oh yeah.
So do you guys still do that practice?
We do. I mean, it was intense for a little while. But also the intensity brought a lot of bonding. At the time I was like, man, we've been married 16 years. I can't believe this is not incremental relationship improvement over a 50-year, marriage. Like this, it was like this material advancement of our relationship in a short time. And we haven't put anything in practice that's like, hey, let's try and make this regular. We just both kind of learned it. And I mean, I'd say every, maybe once a month we'll share something. And I'm pretty content to kind of leave it at that and see what happens. But we learned that it was almost like we were saying, this thought is not our thought. It's just a thought.
Yep.
And then I can share it with you because you won't judge me and say, I can't believe you thought that. All it is, wow, I can't believe you had that thought or experienced that thought. That's all it is. But it's not like, man, Jesse, I can't believe you would ever think that. How dare you? There was none of that, which is credit to Julie, really, in being able to think through that and be emotionally intelligent enough to manage that. But yeah, it's amazing. It's interesting how it's hard to share it with the person you're supposed to be one with.
Yes.
And we had that idea where I thought, well, if we're supposed to be one, then I can't share any thought with you because we're one. To imply that something is still secret, even if it's just a random thought, would mean that there's a little bit I'm holding back. Anyway, it's been awesome. There are probably like therapists or professionals that are listening or could hear this and say, well, yeah, we're just talking about, and name some clinical thing. But for us, it was just kind of raw and worked really well. And I can't imagine going back to, 2 years ago. We just made so much progress, and I didn't even feel like we were in a bad spot. That's what was so cool about the progress. Like, I thought we were supposed to make progress if things were just really bad, but things felt good, and I felt like it was a pretty big leap. So anyway, this is a rookie talk right now, but
let's keep going with this. Let's keep going with this. This is really good. The other theme I'm really picking up here is you and Julie have created a relationship that's probably designed around psychological safety, whether you know it or not, right? Because like you said, using your words, there's no secrets. Even some of my thoughts that are random thoughts. I'm a huge fan of Mark Divine, former Navy SEAL. He wrote the book Unbeatable Mind, and he's got a whole chapter in that book on you are not your thoughts. Like literally, he calls it the monkey mind. And sometimes you'll have the most random, craziest thoughts. You're like, wow, where'd that come from? I must be nuts, or I must be a dark individual, or I must be, and you're not. It's like, you don't identify with your thoughts. Your thoughts are just thoughts, and you are not your thoughts. Right. But how you guys have maybe created psychological safety in your marriage, how do you think you guys have been able to do that?
Oh, man. It reminds me of, that good management book. One of my favorite management books is Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Lencioni. And you have at your base, a functioning team has trust, and they have conflict. They have it. If you don't have conflict, it's actually a dysfunction. And that if there's ever, it's like trust, conflict. If you can air conflict, then you can get accountability, and then accountability gets results. I think commitment and then accountability and then results. You don't get commitment without conflict, and you don't get conflict without trust. So when I have something I need to share with Julie, it's conflict. If I feel like, man, she's not going to agree with me, or this will upset her. So that's conflict. And if I hold it back, then it's a dysfunctional relationship.
Yeah.
So then in order to air conflict, I have to say, do I trust Julie enough to handle what I'm about to bring her? And if I trust her enough, I do. And every time I've brought conflict to Julie or she to me, it's reinforced that base layer of trust. And so anytime you're like, you don't want to tell someone something, you're worried they're going to take it the wrong way.
Yep.
It's all trust every time.
Yeah. Oh man, I didn't expect this, but I'm glad we're going in this direction. I would say, Jessica and I have always had trust. We've always, we sort of have this mantra now. It took us a while to get our hands wrapped around it, but we come to every conversation with curiosity and appreciation. And we sort of have that mantra, curiosity and appreciation, because when you come to a conversation with agenda and outcomes or expectation, usually you're not even actively listening. You're just trying to get your expectations met or your agenda met. So curiosity and appreciation, because even the kids, no matter how they're acting, what they're doing, what they did, how they're behaving, in that moment, it makes total sense to them. So, and I think if we can keep that in mind with our marriages, however she's acting is making total sense to her right now. I don't have to agree with it. Oh, yeah. But it makes total sense to her. And I need, the other thing too is I imagine, just reflecting on your relationship with Julie, that there has probably been a lot of probably emotional validation on both sides, understanding where the other person's at emotionally and being able to just more or less be a rock and a foundation and someone who's like, hey, I just had this thought, or I just had this whatever. And going back to what you said, trust, this person's not going to flip out on me. Because if this person is going to flip out on me, I don't trust them. And this environment is not psychologically safe. So I probably shouldn't say that out loud. But you guys have been able to develop that, which is good. Yeah. I mean, it takes work. Julie's, I think it's one of her greatest skills. And so I've been able to kind of like hitch my wagon to hers, because she is good at she's good at separating emotion from right or wrong. Mm-hmm. She's good at just kind of saying, yeah, you made me mad, the end. Like, I'm done. And I grew up in a family where it was like, oh, you can't be mad. That's wrong. You can't be angry. That's wrong. And she kind of came into my family as the new daughter-in-law, is like a little bit of a bomb. Cause it was like, whoa, here's this person in the family that will just tell you what they're feeling. And so that was new. And I still feel like I fall into the old habit of, I'm upset, so I need to stew. And she'll just straight up tell me like, yeah, that made me so mad. But she's already past it. So I married someone that was emotionally very far along in that regard. And I'm beneficiary of that. But that skill, it serves you everywhere. Yes, it does. Especially when you're raising 7 kids. Yeah, seriously, those crazies. They're crazy. It's interesting you said with the kids, like I had to learn on the agenda part, like when one of my kids leaves their clothes out for the billionth time in a row, I have to remind myself, like, this is not a personal affront. Like they're not trying to offend me. They're not saying like, oh, I'm going to get dad good. I'm going to leave my shoes right here or whatever. They literally just are not thinking of it. And my 14-year-old one time, in like the most sincerest way, not talking back, not being standard teenager, like he was at a sincere moment. I was like, I had you do this job. You didn't do a good job. I felt like you phoned it in. And he's just like, Dad, if I could see it the way you see it, and clean, I think he was cleaning something, I would do it, because it's not worth it to me to have to come back and do it all again. Like, trust me, I would take the 3 minutes. I just cannot see it. And I finally realized, like, oh yeah, he's a kid. It's not that he's not seeing it or he's trying to just skirt by an issue. He really can't see it the same way. And it was a breakthrough that I need to have like flashing lights around almost on a daily basis. Because it's the same thing. It goes back to the thoughts. Like the story I'm telling myself is he's spiting me, and that's just not true. The real story is he's a kid and I'm an adult and maybe an OCD. That's the real story. So anyway, it was kind of, as you were talking about that with the kids, I was reminded of that. Like the story or the thought we have, if you can just make it a little different for yourself, like approach it with curiosity, man, what a reframing. All you got to do is increase that gap between the stimulus and your response. And then you're there. It's when there's no fuse left that there's the real problem. But anyway. So crazy that you're talking about this right now. I just created a whole series course on how to create more patience. And it's a 6-lesson course. It's pretty short, to the point, but packed with basically all the lessons learned from over 500 podcasts and books and things we've learned in our mastermind. But it talks about exactly that. We go through go through, what is patience, how to actually start creating patience first thing in the morning, because your patience, there are things you do in the morning and there's things you don't do in the morning. If you do certain things in the morning, like probably 99% of people do, you're setting yourself up for a shortage of patience, of what we call in that lesson, in that course, emotional capacity. And your fuse is going to be shorter. And then there, in that course, we also talk about the warning signs, because I'm sure as you talk about like, oh, my son did this, palms start to sweat, you start getting the feet tingling, maybe in your neck and shoulders, heart starts to race. And then, so in the lesson, we talk about like, these are warning signs. It's telling you it's coming. Okay. And here's what to do. And then we give ways to avoid all that. And then even in times where you mess up, how to do more of an after action review and ask yourself better questions, and not to should on yourself, because men are great at shoulding. I shouldn't have done that. I should be better. I must be weak. Like I'm just a terrible father, all these poor questions. But yeah, you're right. Going back to that, we did a Q&A not too long ago, and this very thing came up. Like, how do I create more space between like my kids who are leaving their stuff, the lights on, like there's toothpaste in the sink, there's all this, like all these things that just annoy me. And yeah, you're right. We do take it personally. Like, I feel like it's almost like they must not listen to me. I must not be important. They must, I just feel disrespected. And we do take it personally. But one other reflection, and I'm sure you can appreciate this with 7 kids, there will be a day, and it'll go faster than what we can possibly imagine, to where there is no laundry anymore, and there is no shoes on the floor, and the dishwasher takes a couple days to fill, and there's no clothes on the ground, and there's no loudness in the background. There's no pee on the seat anymore, unless it's from you. Jesse.
Or that far along.
Right. And we're going to be like, wow, like, I miss seeing laundry on the floor. I miss hearing craziness in the background. Like, the silence is very loud right now. The silence is actually deafening, when it's me and Jessica or you and Julie. Yeah. So that's something to reflect upon.
You got to be in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Last question about fatherhood and husbandhood and business ownerhood. And how do you, I think it's very clear at this point that everyone probably realizes there is no balance. Like, there's just not. It was a guy with 7 kids, married, business owner. Like, there's really no balance. But I do believe that you can optimize these areas of your life. You can optimize finances. You can optimize your marriage and health and relationship with your kids. And you don't need a gazillion hours to do it. But you, being the father of 7 kids, happily married, business owner, what are certain tactics, very specific tactics and strategies and behaviors that you've put in place to make sure that you're creating those relationships, those connections, and, while managing your finances, while managing a huge company and team now? How have you been able to do that? And I'm sure it hasn't been perfect all the time.
Oh, no, you iterate, you're iterating always. A couple of things that have stayed. I work out when it's been the best is when I've worked out first thing. Just for me, it works better.
Yes.
And so I've tried working out, kind of like get some early work done during quiet, work out at 9:00, get back in the office at 11 or something like that. And I did that for a couple of years. I gave it a good go. And then I just found myself like, I just got to get back to, even if squatting is uncomfortable at early in the morning, I'm still doing that. And so that's a piece. It's like, I get up and I don't pray first. I don't do any kind of like devotional first. I just go straight to like, get my clothes on, go to the gym. I work out at my house, which makes it easier. And then it's kind of all hands on deck for the next hour and a half, usually just getting things rolling. But then after that, I head to the office. I also work from home. We have a detached garage, and so my office is here. The gym is here. The shop, like a little wood shop, is here. It's kind of like a man area for me that I'm thoroughly enjoying. So it's a pretty good gap between me and the house. So I'll walk back over here to the office, and that's when I do kind of my morning, like, get my mind right. So I always pray, meditate. It's quiet time. If, however, people want to kind of find that similarity, and then I'll read some scripture. I've been reading a lot of Nassim Taleb, and he has this idea. It's called the Lindy effect, where if a show's been on Broadway for 100 days, then the likelihood of it being on Broadway for 100 more days is very high. If it's only been on Broadway for 2 days, the likelihood of it being 100 is very low. So it's like everyone's been reading the Iliad for centuries. The likelihood that they'll still be reading it centuries later is very high. So that's the idea of this Lindy effect. It's from a cafe where they would actually look at Broadway shows, and the longer it was on, the longer it would be on, which is a little counterintuitive. So when I read scripture, I kind of am employing that tactic of, I want to find something that people have been reading for centuries, and then because I think they'll keep reading it. Then I'll flip that around a little bit. Now, once I've kind of gotten some wisdom, just a little bit of it's like a touchstone, then I'll move to what I call a hard book. And on my phone, I tell Siri, set a timer for 25 minutes, and I read a hard book. And it's usually a classic, or it's not something like pop psychology that, book of the year type thing. It's again, that Lindy effect thing. This has been around a long time. And then after that, that's usually the whole thing's probably 45 minutes to an hour. Then I turn on the computer and get to work. So that routine's been nice. And it's a little bit like the miracle morning routine people do. I've never read that whole book. I've only seen 100 synopses of it. But the idea of reading something that's really wise and will stay wise for a really long time, I'm enjoying that. And then I also am enjoying reading something that's technically hard for me. I've been trying to tackle The Road to Serfdom. It's hard for me to read it. I have to read slowly, and I have to look up words, but it's, I don't know, a little bit of a grind like that. Trying to expand my horizons some is helpful. And then the work starts. So that's kind of the routine I've done a very close variant of that for, 20 years, basically. That's
what I'm talking about. I think a lot of our sanity, you're very intentional about your morning routine. Your morning routine and mine is so similar.
Is it?
Oh yeah. That's the first thing I do. Up at 5, I'm in the gym by 5:30. Lately, I've been doing this, because we only have pretty much one gym here right now that's open. It's called F45.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, and so I'm in that 6:15 class every morning. So I'm up by 5:30 in that class. I literally get my clothes on, I grab my water, I'm out the door. Mm-hmm. In that, and I'm done by 7. Same thing. I do not crack open a laptop. I do not check Instagram. I do not check Facebook. I do not check anything. The first thing I do. So I do my daily devotional. Yeah. So I read the Bible. I read some scripture. I do some reflection.
It's funny you have a hard copy of it too, because I do too. Yeah. In my side drawer here, I don't want to read. You can read it online in 95 different translations if you want. Right. You got to hold it and read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Yeah, it's like that tactile feel, like the feel of it, the smell of it, being able to write on it, because I take notes on it. And so, my daily devotional is key. I also do reflections of gratitude, something, things that I'm excited for that day, something I failed at the day before, more of an after action review, like how might I be better at that thing that I failed upon. 3 professional goals, 3 personal goals. And the personal goals are always within, what am I doing with my family today to create connection? And I have found on days that I don't do that, my boys, my 2 older ones, we call them the bigs and the littles. So we got 14 and 12. Yeah, they're very aware. Yeah. Do you really? The bigs and the littles?
Where are the littles? Yeah.
Where are the littles?
I always do that.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad that I'm not the only one. So, and the littles, they're kind of oblivious. But the funny thing is like the bigs will be like, did you do your morning routine today? You don't seem like you did your morning routine today. And I'm like, they just know. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's actually one of the pieces in the course we just launched is like, you have to have everyone's talking about like the morning routine can be exhausting because you're like, oh my God, if I see one more thing of someone posting a morning routine, I think I'm going to throw up. But as well as I do, that solid morning routine is going to make or break your day. Just the way you start it. I find that if I start checking emails before I do all that stuff, I'm on everybody else's agenda. I'm putting out fires and now I'm into fight or flight. And that usually sets up for a pretty poor day of interacting with my wife, kids, business, whole 9 yards. So
here's a tactic. Here's one that's just like, if someone's just aching for like, I want to feel good and get a dopamine hit. As far as email goes, Mondays and Thursdays, I process email. And my rule, and I've been doing this for about 9 months. My assistant she used to manage my inbox. She went on maternity leave and I ran it the whole 4 months she was gone, the system. And then when she came back, I just was like, hey, Caitlin, I'm good. Like, you don't need to run my inbox. I have this. And so anyway, I've tested it for about now probably 8 months. Every email when I'm on a Monday or Thursday, I have to reply to it or set up a filter to never see it again or mark it as spam. So it's a very hard line. And I don't know how many filters. I mean, they're just Gmail filters, nothing fancy, right? It's just like, one of the rental properties sends me a monthly newsletter about a city I don't live in, and I'm like, I don't need to ever see that again. So you just have to kind of ask yourself, like, could I filter this out forever and never see it and be okay? If our utility bill is automatically paid, it's like, I don't need to see that. If our card bounced or like something bounced or, we had to change our debit card or whatever, then is it overdue for some weird reason? Then I'd want to see.
Yeah.
But I set up, just filter after filter. So you either have to reply right then. If it's a big reply, like it's a project, then I might say, I'll draft something, write it, think about it. That's not, normal email. That's like work. But you reply, you mark it as spam, or you filter it to never see it again. And it's awesome. Like, it's awesome. So I know there are probably services that are like, oh, we do that already for you. Maybe that's true. I'm like, this is like poor man's version, but it is phenomenal. I mean, there are so many things you get and when you start thinking, I have to filter this, but you do that for 4 or 5 weeks, just kind of steady. And pretty soon it's quiet, So anyway, there's a little bit of a tactics if anyone wants to give that a go.
I'm stealing that idea.
Yeah, totally. Steal it. Yeah, write a book about it and help people, man.
Really.
Email is a slave master.
Oh, it is. I should have done this a long time ago, but I just started doing from 9 to 10 as email.
Yeah,
and then I'll do it from like 3 to 3:30. So twice a day. Yeah. I do not respond to emails that just come flying in. I'm trying to get better with that with my text messages now. So that one's a tough one, but I need to be more disciplined. But I'm glad. I'm really glad we started the show that way. I mean, there's such a great launching pad for what we're going to get into. On this podcast, we're always talking about the 5 dimensions of being a husband, father, provider, and those are mastering your finances, optimizing your health, so it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. Really big into that, as well as creating a legendary marriage. We gave some nuggets on that one. Epic connection with your kids. We gave some really great nuggets, I think, there in the beginning of like, if you want to set up your day for more patience and more connection and more inspiration and influence, start with a morning routine and then being a leader in your business. For you, I know being the founder of YNAB, Jesse, I got to tell you, and this is no secret for you. You understand this. Mastering our finances, the majority of us, and I don't even know the percentages, but the majority of us were never, ever taught personal finance growing up. It wasn't taught in high schools. It wasn't taught in colleges. And most people like, oh, I got a new credit card, like swipe, swipe, swipe. And then they wake up one day and they buy a house that was too much and they bought cars that were too much and they've got credit cards out the yin yang. You're like, holy cow, like what just happened? I don't even understand what happened. And I think most people who are married, have a couple kids, I think for the most part, it's safe to say that they would love to be better with finances. But I think the biggest confusing thing is, and that's why I love YNAB. I mean, I love YNAB. It's such an incredible tool for budgeting. It's different mindset. It's not like your typical budget. It's like, I love the envelope system, and I love being very proactive with your money, give every dollar a job. But I think it's overwhelming for most people. That most people are scratching their head being like, oh, where do I start?
Yeah.
Where do we start?
Yeah. If you really want to, what's that musical? Is it Sound of Music? Start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. That's a song.
Yeah.
And, we won't sing it. I mean, it would be good if we did, but we won't. So we'll move along. But if you really want to get to the starting point of money, it actually does not involve money.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where people will get quick to money. And if you have some dysfunction around money in your relationship, then it's a bit of a landmine, it's tricky to navigate. You say something kind of wrong, and suddenly someone's feeling like you're pointing fingers, and then they're pointing fingers, and it's just blame. I'm not saying people can't make serious mistakes with money, and totally we all do. But if you want to have a good, meaningful money conversation, you just back way up, and you just got to ask yourself, what do we want?
Yeah.
What are we dreaming about? And I'm amazed how many couples never have a conversation around, like, what are you aspiring to be, to become? What are we aspiring to in our marriage? Like, what do we want this to look like? Not 30 years from now, like 2 years from now.
Yeah.
What do we want it to look like? And if you start there, then pretty soon money's not always simple. It can get a lot simpler. It's not, if you're dead, it's simple. Other than that, there's always a little bit of something going on. And so it's not like it's ever this panacea, but you can get to a point where money is not a material concern, the management of it. But when you get your visions aligned, then all these little questions that used to add tons of stress to your relationship, like, can we buy that? Or someone's like, we should do that. Or you see some friends that go on vacation somewhere, and you're like, oh, we should go on a vacation, whatever it is. When you have that alignment on your vision, then you just hold it up against the vision, and you're like, well, yeah, we should go on this vacation, or no, we shouldn't. And it's not like there's no guilt there. It's just matter of fact decision-making between two people that, share a common purpose. So that's the point to start. Don't even breathe money, numbers, salary, take-home pay, 401k. All that is so much further down the road. You get the goals right, then you just start to have your money line up with your goals, and you feel, even if you're still in mountains of debt, you feel peace. You can feel peace in, I don't want to make this sound like I'm promising something that's not true. This is true. You can literally feel more peace in an hour and a half. It's just being intentional. Just as you mentioned earlier, just being intentional.
I think that's really powerful. In fact, I remember when you first came on the show, and I remember what my expectation of the show was going to be. I was like, oh, we're going to talk numbers. We're going to talk this. We're going to talk that. And I was so pleasantly surprised that we didn't really, yes, of course you need to be a good steward of your money. YNAB is an excellent way to be proactive with your money. And I love, like I said, I'll say it again. I love the tagline, give every dollar a job. But I'll never forget, out of 500 shows, I'll never forget something that you said. If you want to start somewhere, don't bring a laptop to your first financial meeting with your wife. Don't bring numbers, bring a piece of paper and a pencil, and create a vision around what is it that you truly value? What do you want your life to look like? And I got to tell you, I really reflected on that. My wife and I sat down after I did that show with you, and we really got clear on a lot of things. And I'll share that with you. We have neighbors that drive nice cars. We don't drive nice cars. We actually hate cars. Like, my wife drives a beat up. Oh yeah. My wife drives a beat up 2010 Honda Odyssey, 144,000 miles. It acts up all the time. The car that I drive was $13,000. It's nothing fancy. It's a Nissan Altima. We made a decision. We're like, we don't value what we drive. We don't need an expensive vehicle. Vehicles, with multiple kids, a vehicle is pretty much a moving buffet of goldfish in the seat.
Yeah, it is. People are like, do you stock food? I'm like, I think we actually do. Yeah. It's all in crumbs, but it's there. Yeah.
It is there. The other thing that we really found out that we value is experiences over stuff. Mm-hmm. So we have 4 kids, and my wife and I made a decision. We're like, you know what? $50 per kid at Christmas. That's it. Stocking stuffers, grandma and grandpa, if they want to get some bigger items, that's fine, but $50 per kid. And what we're going to do is take what we would normally spend on Christmas, which actually wasn't that much anyway. And we are going to do an experience, and something that is literally, we'll probably remember it years from now, if not on our deathbed. So we made that decision. The other thing that we really found that we value, because the first time I interviewed you, we were in a different house. We truly value our environment. So environment is a very big deal. It affects our mood. It affects our health. It affects how we function. And our house was something that we were willing to, and we don't live in crazy fancy house at all, but we wanted to be like, okay, we'll put a little bit more money into the home that we feel like our family can come together and make memories, and everybody feels good here. Yeah. So we did that. And you're right. It's funny how things have actually happened, because when you adjust to what I would call being in alignment with your core values as it pertains to money, you don't really worry about keeping up with the Joneses. You don't, and I don't think you purchase things that are reckless either. You make very you have things to gut check those decisions against and be like, is this really of value to me? If it's not, there's no reason for me to buy it.
Yeah. So,
and it sounds like that's a good place for people to start. Like, that's what you recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some interesting, I mean, there's just no caveat there. That's it. I'll share just something kind of boots on the ground. If people are curious, like, where do they start from a very, start today kind of approach too, that's totally about money. When we interview people, I interview them regularly for what we call debt stories. And it's where we just get someone's story about how much debt they've paid off. And it's not the boring kind. We don't interview someone that's like, I'm slowly chipping away, I should be done in 25 years. Like, these are people that are moving. And they're not always out of debt. Some of them still have a good bit, but they've made significant strides. And at YNAB, we have a very intentional brand. We're friendly, we're approachable, we're empathetic. We're not preachy, but we are professional. Like, we have advice, but we aren't going to, browbeat you. There's a feel there. I mean, and so we won't say you shouldn't spend here, you shouldn't spend there, because we just had this whole conversation around find out what you care about and spend your money on it. So the brand doesn't say ever like, don't do that, or how dare you, buy that thing. I don't even like giving examples, because then it sounds like I actually don't think you should buy that if I'm using it as an example of something you shouldn't buy. So I try and steer clear of everything. I used to say boots all the time. It's like, oh, if you love boots, and people are like, maybe he really doesn't like boots. I guess I don't, but I don't know. But I try not to give examples, because it's like, you just do whatever you want to do with your money, as long as you're being honest with yourself. Yeah. But all that being said, as we interview people, I'll ask them, where'd you come up with the extra money to suddenly start? Here you were adding to your debt month after month after month. And then suddenly you've flipped it around and you're paying $1,000 on your debt, $1,500 a month, $2,000. It's this total about face. And I've done maybe only 35 of these interviews. So we're still in anecdotal territory, but across all different income spectrums, all different setups, all different relationship setups, everyone without fail said they stopped eating out. And so at some point I'm like, I think I need to start telling people they ought to look there. And it's not because I don't think it's funny, because we had the whole, stay at home, so people didn't eat out. And then suddenly cooking became a concern, and like Google searches for cooking skyrocketed. And how do you boil things? We're losing the skill to cook at home, it seems like, based on Google trends. But it's interesting that we had that little forced experiment upon us. And it was amazing to watch people really scramble and be like, oh my gosh, how do I eat if I can't stop at Chipotle? I'm a far cry from chasing something down and gutting it. And I couldn't even do that with a chicken. Like, it's on my bucket list. I want to learn how to like prep something. What do you call it? To dress something, but I haven't done it yet. So I'm not saying like you need to go gather your own food, but it seems like the pendulum kind of swung. And from all these interviews we've had, people find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars there. So if you love eating out and you're a foodie and you like to see the little curly cucumber thing and like a froth of whatever, that's cool. But like for the other 99 out of 100 people, look there, because there is money to be found. And the next time you think you want to like save time and just grab some Chick-fil-A, I love spicy chicken deluxe. It's good. And I love their shakes. Those are killer. But the next time you do that, leave the house, start your clock, and then see how long it takes you. Because people are like, well, I got to save time. And I'm soapboxing here on purpose. Like, we've done all these interviews. Everybody is saying the same thing. Like, I cut eating out. So anyway, I'm done.
No, man, I was hoping you'd keep going. That's why I was giving you a thumbs up, because that's true. Like, my wife for Mother's Day, I was like, hey, what do you want for dinner? Do you guys have mod pizza out there?
Yeah.
Love mod pizza. And my wife like loves this vegetarian, gluten-free mod pizza that we get there. And I was like, what do you want for dinner? And she's like, I want a mod pizza, vegetarian mod pizza for dinner. I was like, okay, cool. I was like, we actually have the cauliflower crust here, gluten-free. And I was like, and we have all the veggies, and I got the tomato sauce and dairy-free cheese. I can make you one. She's like, no, like let's save time. Just go pick it up. And no kidding around. I mean, we're only like 4 days from, Mother's Day was just 4 days ago, even though we're releasing this in August. And when I got back, my wife goes, I think you would have spent the same time, maybe even less, because mod pizzas was like 15 minutes there and back. It was 30 minutes. And plus I had to wait for the pizza to be cooked. And she's like, you probably actually could have saved the $30 and made a better pizza and probably did it in less time, and you wouldn't have had to leave. So I don't even know why I asked you to do that. And I was like, but in my mind, I was like, yeah, that'll save time. Like, somebody else will make the food. And I literally, it's funny that she said that, because I had that thought on the way home. I was like, I don't know if this saved any time at all. In fact, it actually cost me more time and definitely more money. So yeah.
There's like, it's definitely something that I've become more aware of, and that the forced experiment with the stay-at-home stuff really brought it to a head. Yeah, where you could just kind of observe, almost panic for people, but also everyone is so resilient as well. So it was very cool to kind of see people be like, okay, I'm going to learn to cook too. Yeah. So I like seeing both sides. A little bit of an alarm, like, man, we're kind of growing really dependent on this supply chain and this whole infrastructure that feeds us all in drive-thrus. And then learning that there's a whole other pastime that we could maybe get in touch with. A lot of history there too. So that's, if people are like, where do I save money? How do I pay off debt? Look there first before you look anywhere else. Leave a little bit just for fun, or go out with your wife, go out. Like, I'm not talking dates. That's totally, you're not buying food then. You're buying a date. Like, it's a different exchange. But for the stuff where you're like, oh, we got to hurry. We're hustling. We got to get to ball practice or whatever. Just maybe consider looking there for some fat cutting. Yeah, eating out. I think it was the three biggest expenses are housing, food, and transportation. Last time I looked, that's what Americans are spending the majority of their money on. What are some other aha moments that you've had working with thousands and thousands of families now with software? What have been some big aha moments? Wrong question. What have been some really incredible successes that people have had? Oh man, we have a channel in our internal Slack at work called Feedback, and if we find something that's someone shares a story, we'll just post it there so you can kind of scroll through and read them. I don't like taking credit for it, because people are just kind of saying, "Oh, here's a tool," and then they're doing all of the work. It's like taking credit for a house when you gave someone a hammer. So like all the work is still involved, Yeah, good point. I like that. so people like, but people, I don't know, something clicks and they take off with it. In light of the whole pandemic thing and all this uncertainty and who knows what it will look like, months from now. But in light of all of that, we had so many people write in and just say, I am so glad I started this 6 months ago, a year ago. I was just laid off, or I was furloughed, or my hours were cut. I mean, just because you use some software doesn't mean you're not immune to all kinds of negative externalities.
Sure.
But the thing that it's maybe one kind of take home for people, and I'm usually, this is where I get in trouble, because on these interviews, a lot of times I want to share what's most recently on my mind, and it's like the stuff that's least fleshed out. So it's like the opposite of what a politician would do, where they have like that one thing they just nail, every time. Yeah. This is not it. But the idea of, years and years ago, I remembered I was thinking, okay, Julie and I have been very clear with each other on kind of what our division of roles are. And Julie said, I want to be able to stay at home and be a mom 100%. I don't want to have to worry about making money. And I said, I will worry about making money. I'll provide, and you nurture, and we'll do this together. And of course, there's all kinds of overlap there, but you understand the principle of the situation. So that was the role. So I thought, I'm the provider here, and I have these two little boys. No, I had three at the time. So Lydia was along, and I had this thought. I don't know if it was during the 2008 recession or a little after or whatever, but things were fine for us. The recession didn't hurt YNAB really. I mean, it was kind of same old. But I just remember thinking, if everything really went south, my role as a provider does not go away. And a lot of the times you'll see this where people will say, well, I didn't know this would happen, therefore, and you're like, well, therefore what? You're still on the hook. You're still a provider. So you need to think about providing in lots of circumstances. And that's what has led me recently, in light of watching people really panic and really, really just get, just a lot of stress that's avoidable. I've started trying to think through where I put my money and my time, and trying to recognize that I want to have some things that are inherently valuable in my financial ecosystem, where we're a little more self-reliant, a little less reliant on that optimized, profitable, just-in-time supply chain. And because the role of provider doesn't change, it's just because you're ordered to stay at home. And I don't want to be the guy that has to go out there and battle crowds and get into, all kinds of unpleasant situations. I want to be able to say, well, I thought ahead, And YNAB, if it's anything, it's just about kind of looking ahead and being like, I wonder if future Jesse would appreciate it if I would do this. And if he would, maybe I should do it. And that's how a lot of you just think about kind of weaving a net where you're like, you're going to catch something. You're going to be able to catch this that'll happen that's not great. If your job is a little bit shaky, you should have more money set aside, more cash set aside. You should even have cash set aside even if there's debt there. Like, cash is king. It's options. If you are in a situation where you couldn't go 3 days without going to the grocery store, fix that. You're a provider, even if the grocery store has to close down, And I'm no doomsdayer at all. I think people are way too kind and generous and good as humanity goes. But I like to think that I would not have to abdicate that role to anyone else that came along. So that's totally new for me in kind of formulating that. But I'm finding a lot of comfort in spending time working on that aspect. Like, oh man, this garden is valuable no matter what, and raising these chickens, that's valuable for so many reasons. One is the kids have to do work. We have to dig fence post holes, which is horrible. We have to break rocks with like a bar breaker, and all these good things that are just healthy for these kids to see and do. But at the end of the day, it was like, these things are inherently valuable and the value doesn't go away. And I want to have some of that in my system. as a provider. So people oftentimes will say, like, where do you invest? Where do you do this? Where do you do that? And I'll be honest, I invest in getting my house paid off because it's inherently valuable. It's shelter. It's not, that's it. It's just shelter, you know? My kids have clothes and I want to make sure they have food. And from there, you just wait and see what happens. But think about things where the value will never change, and make sure as a provider, you have some of those things always. So that's brand new, but it's something that I felt like, at least with your audience, I felt like that could be shared. You know? So.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I like that because it gives us the basics, you know, like it's like the basic human needs, right? Shelter and food. I spoke to my financial advisor. Everybody's like, oh, you should pay the house off, make extra payments to the bank, you know, do this, do that. And it's like Captain Obvious, right? Yeah. Captain Obvious of paying your house off. But my financial advisor said, let me give you some advice. He's like, I'm going to tell this to all my clients. Anybody who tells me they want to pay their house off, exactly what you just said. Cash is king. If you want to pay your house off, great. We'll take your money. We'll put it into a fund, you know, that's pretty conservative. It's not really aggressive. It's kind of more protected against the ebbs and flows. Whatever extra payments you want to make to your house, you know, if you want to pay your house off in 5 years, great. Put it there. Don't give that money to the bank, because if something happens and you need to get your hands on that cash and now the bank has it and it's in the equity of your home, best of luck. And if you're not making payments on your house, by the way, no matter if you've made extra payments or not, the bank is going to be like, oh, so sorry, you know, we're still going to foreclose. So that was great advice from our financial advisor. That's my same line of thinking when people say 15-year or 30-year. I tell people 30-year because it's great to pay your house off faster. I've done it with I'm in my second house. It's paid off. Like, I love the paid off house. But I opted for the 30-year because I didn't want to be on the hook for the 15. I'll accelerate on my terms. So you build up a little nest egg, you have a little fund that's very conservative, that's just kind of building and building. And then every once in a while you just peel some off and say, yeah, okay, I'll actually pay it down. But the risk with that is people will say, they'll do math on you as if to cancel the advice. And they'll say, well, you'll get a better return in the market, maybe, or you'll get a better return here. But people never actually invest the difference. They spend it on the Chipotle we were talking about earlier. And that's the problem. So if you're disciplined enough to actually say, this would go to the house, therefore it goes here, and it is essentially gone in your mind, and you don't use it to renovate the kitchen later, that's working. It's when people are like, oh, but you'll get a better return. No one actually invests it. They just say that you would hypothetically get a better return. Bugs the heck out of me. So my hat goes off to him for actually forcing the behavior and not just talking theoretically, which a lot of advisors are prone to do in that situation. Yeah, I totally agree. I love that advice. I feel almost like a moron that, 45 years old, you're getting that advice. Just as we wrap up here, first of all, this has been unexpectedly, I'm glad we went in the direction we did in the very beginning. I enjoyed it. Me too. But just to kind of give the audience a little flavor, like I know I've been talking about YNAB for a couple of years now. A lot of our guys use it. We have new people that are using the 34-day trial constantly in our audience. And one thing I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, people love the software. But for those who have never used it or don't know much about it, how does it work? So it's oh man. All right. So there are a couple of things. One is you only ever budget money you actually have on hand. That's number one. So you don't think I will get paid, I will make this money, so I'll budget this pretend money. You look at your checking account balance and you say how much is in there, and then you say what should that money do? That's the first rule. Give every one of those dollars a job. You never give money a job that you don't actually have. It makes everything simple once we follow that rule. The second rule is, we call it embracing your true expenses. But you look ahead to those larger, less frequent expenses, like Christmas. You mentioned $50 a kid, so you can float that pretty easily. But a big experience, you got to maybe set aside some money for those things. So you would
you have that, let's say you want to have your big experience in, 12 months from now, and that experience is going to cost you $2,400, then it's a $200 bill, 2,400 divided by 12, that you set aside every single month. And what we're trying to do is normalize months. Where people get in trouble is they spend right up to what they have. And then when something surprises them, like their car tire blows out, then they have to put it on a card because they don't have any money. And it's like, oh man, I'm such a victim. Well, no, you made your bed, you just are sleeping in it now. So the idea is that you look ahead and you say, there's never been a car tire that hasn't worn out. So I won't pretend mine are that way. And you just set aside a little bit of money. If you're driving a Honda Odyssey, it's a 2010, ours is a 2012, you don't need to set aside a lot for repairs. Same with the Altima. You just don't, they run pretty well. So maybe $150 a month is like your car repairs bill. You set that aside and you just let it grow. Years ago, just to kind of branch off for a moment, we had a 2002 Honda Civic and a Town and Country, not my favorite. And we were putting $150 a month, and we've been doing that for years. And one day I noticed that the amount of money in our car repairs category was actually more than the Civic was worth. And I was like, oh, Julie, we have $6,000 in this car repairs category and we aren't touching it. And so we pulled some out. But the idea was there will be a repair, and there will be. The house is going to need a new HVAC at some point. The roof will need some repairs. Something will happen. So you're always just looking ahead and thinking about future Larry, like, will Larry want this money for the tires? Yes, he will. And you set a little aside, The third rule, it's funny we have to make it a rule, but in the software, you have this interface. You can move the money around. You can give those dollars jobs, and you can also change your mind whenever you want. And in light of the pandemic that everyone kind of lived through, people were doing that a ton. It would be funny if you think about it now, you're like, well, okay, I've set up my budget. And then suddenly you have this pandemic. And then everyone's like, oh, no, I'm not going to change a thing. It's like, well, no, of course you are, because we've never seen this in 100 years. So the idea that you set a budget and then never can change it is ludicrous. You want to think more as like a chess master or like a NFL coach, right? You're always adjusting based on what you're seeing. And that's how it is with budgeting. That is budgeting, is doing those adjustments. And then finally, the last rule is we want you to age your money. So $1 you spend today, you should have earned at least 30 days ago. And just give yourself a little bit of breathing room. Those are the rules. The software is transactions, ins, outs, categorize, put piles of money where they need to be. If you're just starting, be in the software daily, like build just a little bit of a habit. As you get more advanced, you can do it less. Some people will connect it with their banks and they'll pull in the transactions. Other people are like me, all of 2019. I just manually recorded every single transaction. I made it part of that morning routine. 5 minutes, I'd log into my bank. I would manually type in transactions. Never felt more connected with the ins and outs of our household's money. So if you're just starting out, put it as part of your coffee habit. Just like, I'm going to log into my bank, and you'll find it's surprisingly therapeutic. So that's kind of how it works. The software is straightforward. We have classes all the time. And people are like, I don't need a class. I don't need to read a manual. Like, don't, just do the class. Like, you'll be weeks ahead if you just listen to one of our teachers for 25 minutes. So they'll connect like how you're thinking about it and how you've thought about it incorrectly. We'll fix that. And then they'll also show you how these principles are, hands-on working in the software. So I can't overstate that. So that's my little pitch. The 34-day free trial gives you enough time to kind of see from 1 month to the next how things roll. Just you spend so much of your life trying to earn money. And then once it's converted from time to $1, we're just so flippant about it. So YNAB just wants you to be a little more intentional. Once all that energy and effort and time and career advice and work and strategy you put into making the money, like, let's take 10% of that effort and use it for once it actually is money, and go from there. Anyway.
I think that's why I like the term "give every dollar a job," because I think so many Americans, probably people worldwide as well, my money manages me.
Oh yeah.
Like it's almost like this, it's my boss. But I love it. I feel like when I do that discipline, that I am the one who's telling my money what to go do.
Yeah.
And that feels really good. And yeah, you're right. We put $135 a month into our car maintenance. We rarely use it. You know, we use it for like the oil changes and that kind of thing. But then when we have like my massive dog who walked in the room, we had to, you know, I have always set aside $150 a month, pay for his dog food and like anything that happens.
Yeah.
And last week, dude, we went to the vet. He's been gimping. And $632 later, after x-rays, blood work, and urinalysis, I was like, oh my gosh, thank God. Ever since we got him when he was a puppy 10 months ago, we've been setting that money aside. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah.
Like we've been prepping for that, you know, and knock on wood, nothing's really happened too bad with the cars yet, but you know, cars are old and
it'll
happen, but we've got that money set aside, which is great. But I like having that control, and I like not being, I hate surprises like that. And you're right. Most people will be like, oh, I guess I'll put it on the credit card. God only knows when I'll pay it off. But it's like, here's the other cool thing. You know, you mentioned the word provider over and over and over again. My wife came home from the vet and she was like almost in tears. She was like, we have a $600 bill, like $632 bill. And I was able to look at her and be like, we got it. We're good. I've been setting money aside for months ever since we got him. She's like, oh, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. She was so relieved to be able, as her provider, her man, her husband, to be able to be like, that's been set aside for a while. We're fine. Yeah. She was so relieved. So that's how like that telling my money what to do shows up in what I would like to call financial intimacy. To be able to tell my wife that felt pretty darn good as her man.
You love to brag a little, you know?
A little bit. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is when the car mechanic, whatever, they're like, this is going to be this. Sorry. Like they're so apologetic because everyone else that walks through the door making the same amount of money, like ins and outs are the same. It's just that person's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then they tell you it's $632 and it's like, well, yeah, I don't want to pay it, of course.
Yeah.
I have 19 other things that would be more fun to spend money on, you know?
Right.
But yeah, we can handle that.
Yeah.
And the idea of like, I can handle that is part of it. It's just being a little more future oriented.
Yeah.
And then you get to a spot where people, you know, financial advisors, standard fare is like have an emergency fund. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But a car repair is not an emergency. That's living. That's like saying groceries is an emergency. Like, oh my gosh, suddenly I felt so hungry.
We're out of food.
There's this emergency. And you're like, no, that happened 3 hours ago. It'll happen again. Like we only call it emergency because the distance between the events has increased. But it's just normal. It's just living, you know? And so you'll find with YNABers, they'll have the emergency fund. Like the COVID-19, that's like bona fide, like boom, emergency, you know? But watch as people will have learned from that if they're smart. And they'll start to be like, okay. So I have these kind of rainy day funds set up for car repairs, this and this. I'm going to do one for groceries, and I'm going to do one for this. And they'll just kind of, again, orient toward the future a little more and just be a little safer, a little more. I mean, it's just about being a wise steward. And you go back to like the Bible story, like the 7 years of famine stuff. You go back to that and you're like, oh, all he was doing was saying, I'm going to think about the future and set aside. And, you know, with the rest is history. What we do in a daily basis, weekly basis, it's all the same thing. You're just looking ahead and planning a little. And you'll find as someone that has that deep in him, like I want to provide, you'll find that when you weigh those two, like I could buy this thing now. What do I want for my shop? I want a jointer, right? I could buy this jointer now, or I could set aside money for eventual house repairs. As a provider, you start to weigh those and you aren't just saying, do I have the money? Do I want the jointer? That's not a good decision or a good question. You're saying, I have the money. Yes. Do I want this or this? that's a decision that a provider makes. And you're never deciding, is there enough? And that's my info. Now I can buy it. It's a garbage. Like the checking account balance tells you how much money's in the checking account. The end. But what you really want to know is, I have that much. Now, how do I weigh this? And I would just urge people to weigh the future a little more than we are programmed to do. Right? Anyway.
I think
we could go on for a while, but
no, I love that. I love that because it's an intentional choice with planning. So I'm a big MyFitnessPal. I think I got a little dopamine hit this morning. Like, oh, you have logged 407 days straight.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, oh, sweet. But I'm relentless with my money when it comes to planning like that and putting things where it needs to be. Also with my food, you know, and what I'm eating and that kind of thing. So for me, on date nights, like my wife and I are actually going to get to go on a date night tomorrow night, which we haven't done that in like 3 months. Yeah. But like, I know specifically where we're going. I know the food that I like. I know how many calories it is. I know we will probably have a glass of wine at dinner. So I'm going to stay within my caloric range that I need to and hit my macros, my micros and all that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat a certain way during the day, kick back a little bit, you know, a little less than I normally would. Because I know we're going to have like this really tasty meal together on our date night, but it's the planning thing. So I don't wake up on, you know, Saturday. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. It's like, no, I planned for that. And here's how I planned for it. So yeah, there's intentionality, there's planning. And with planning, I think, like you said, you can make wiser choices, you know, and you find out like what it is that you value, you know? So I like that. Well, as we wrap up here, I know our audience can find the 34-day trial you gave our audience, which is gooddadproject.com/YNAB. That's You Need a Budget, YNAB. But as we close out here, is there any last bits of advice that you have for us?
Just, go slow, be patient with yourself. You know, I mean, you don't retool a bunch of financial habits out of the gate. So just kind of know that it's a process. I'm still tinkering, experimenting, learning how to manage finances as they change out from underneath me a lot of the time. And so just know that the whole thing is always a process. There is no end for it. It's just a process. Yeah. And I think that gives you a little bit of license to, you know, fall on your face a few times, learn a little bit and go forward from there. So be patient and just keep tacking away at it.
I love that, man. Dude, thanks so much for coming back on, gentlemen. We're talking to Jesse Mecham, who is the founder of YNAB. Obviously has changed the life of thousands of families, thousands of providers. Thank you for what you've created. Thank you for creating the software and a way that we don't have to be slaves to our money, that we can give every dollar a job. So, and I also want to thank you for the very unexpected nuggets and conversation that we got to talk in the first 30 minutes of this show.
It's a pleasure.
You're a good man. Good man.
Thank you.
You bet. Gentlemen, that's all we have for you today. Go to gooddadproject.com/278 for this particular show. You'll find all the links if you want to follow Jesse on social media, all the resources they have at YNAB. And if you want to use our free 34-day trial, we'll have a link for you there too, or you can go to gooddadproject.com/YNAB. All right, gentlemen, go out, live on purpose, and above all else, live legendary. Take care.